guys, welcome to my channel, Lily Makes Stuff. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made the Escape Cardigan. We are currently on a cruise, and in the cruise world there are sister ships, and this would be the sister ship to the Calypso Kimono Cardigan. This is just a light cardigan that would be good for air conditioning and for some warmer weather. If you've watched my previous patterns, previous designs, you'll know that I do not use currently I am not using the traditional way of making a pattern with specific stitch count for a specific size. I unfortunately am one of those people who buy yarn based on whim. Actually, it's not so much whim as much as sale. And so I sometimes buy my yarn first and then figure out what I'm going to make instead of the other way around. So this makes it a little bit easier to use different kinds of yarn, and can be customized to a lot of different sizes. So this is what I used on my project. I used the Noro Silk Garden Solo yarn, which is a medium weight yarn, and I used two different hook sizes. For the majority of the project I used a size 6, and then for the edging on the collar and the sides I used a 7mm hook. I used approximately 10.5 skeins of this Noro. Of those 10.5 skeins, half of them, well, technically they were all the same color, but half of them were a different dye lot. And because they were different enough in color, I treated them as two different colors. So when we get into the corner to corner stitch, I will show you how you can change colors if you want to. The majority of the stitching in this project is going to be using corner to corner, and it's very easy, great for beginners, and it's also really good for being able to predict exactly how much yarn you're going to need. So I actually did that. I mapped out my program, and I mapped out my pieces on grid paper, and I will get more into the specifics of how to do that, and figured out exactly mathematically how much yardage I was going to need, and actually used a little bit less. So you know, you can gauge your own work, and I will show you how to do that. And still gauging it, I still came out a little bit less than what I had mapped out. The other things that would be good for this project, well, the measuring tape is kind of essential, helping you figure out what size to make the different pieces. And if you don't have a second person to help you measure out the measurements, you can tape them to your body and use a mirror to help you figure out exactly what measurements. The other thing is stitch markers. You don't have to use these lovely little plastic ones. You can use cutting off little pieces of yarn. I would suggest using different colored yarn so that you can see them really easy. Another thing you're going to need is a tapestry needle and scissors. So to begin with, these are the measurements that you're going to need to know. We're going to make 5 pieces: the back panel, 2 fronts, 2 sleeves. And Barbie's going to be my Vanna. She's going to help me demonstrate these measurements. They're pretty straightforward. Elbow to elbow. And again, if you have to tape it to your elbow and then look in the mirror. So here's 5 inches for Barbie's measurement A, and that's going to help you figure out the width of the back panel. The length of the back panel is going to be from her shoulder down to her hip, which I go from the top of the shoulder and then down to the hip, and then you're going to add 2, and on the elbow to elbow you're going to subtract 4 from whatever measurement that you get. Measurement C is going to be the width of the front panel, so it's based on measurement A. So for me, my elbow to elbow was 30 inches, minus 4 would be 26. And then, so if you take 26, my 26, your measurement A, minus another 4, which would be 22, and then you divide it by 2 or half it, that's going to be your measurement C. So for me, it was 11 inches. And then I planned on 4 inches for the neck space. So the last 2 pieces you're going to make are the 2 sleeves. And again, just a reminder, it's going to be your measurement D, which is the width of your sleeve. So it's the circumference of your upper arm, or the widest part of your arm, plus 1. And then measurement E is going to be your wrist to elbow. Okay, so how do you quote unquote map out your project? This gets a little mathy, which I'm not great at math, so I'm going to try and simplify everything as best I can. You might need to rewind this and go over it a couple times for it to make sense. But so we have our measurements right here, so we know what we got to get to, but how do we do it? I will show you how to do the corner to corner stitch, but how do we know how many squares, because corner to corner is based on squares, how many squares to make your back panel, your front panel, and your sleeves? So I'm going to show you, but I'm basically mapping out, here is my back panel, and then in the back panel I have the 2 side panels, and then I mapped out how many squares I needed for the sleeves. Okay, so how do you do this? So first thing, you're going to want to make a swatch or a gauge of approximately 5 squares by 5 squares. You can do 4 squares, you can do 6 squares, it doesn't matter. Whatever number by whatever number you do, you're going to measure. So let's say I did 5 by 5. So you take those 5 squares, and for me they measured, I'm going to write this in, 4.5 inches. Okay, 4.5 inches is what my 5 squares measured. You take that 4.5, which is going to be A, and you divide it by 5. Okay, and that turned out to be 0.9. Okay, so each one of my squares was 0.9 inches. Okay, so for all my measurements, all of them, for me, my elbow to elbow was minus 4 was 26. My shoulder to hip was 22, plus 2, 24. Sorry. So each one of these measurements, you're going to take and divide by your B, whatever number you got for B. Okay, I know it seems like you should be multiplying, but no, you divide. Okay, so let's take, for example, my measurement A. My measurement A was 26 inches. Okay, divided by 0.9 equaled 28.8, which you can't make a square an integer. It has to be a whole number. So I took that 28 and I rounded it up to the next whole number, which would be 29, okay? So I mapped out 29 squares for my width, my measurement A, okay? And you're gonna wanna do that for A, all the measurements, A through E, okay? And that's how you can map out your project. And there's this cool website, it's called stitchfiddle.com. And I know that most people don't just have grid paper on hand, but that website is a free website that can help you map out your corner-to-corner projects. So you can go to that website and map out your project, or you might be able to, I'm not for sure, print out grid paper and then you can write it out. The other good thing about mapping out your project is if you decide to have any color changes, it will help you know exactly which square to begin the color changes. And just be aware, if you do color changes, it will add a little bit to the amount of yarn that you need, which mapping out your project also helps you determine how much yarn you're going to need. And I will show you some more math on how to do that. Okay, so you've mapped out how many squares you're going to need for each of the 5 pieces. But how does that help you determine how much yarn you're going to need? Okay, so you're going to take that same swatch, which is basically 5 by 5 squares, so a total of 25 squares. And you are going to undo it, you're going to frog it, you're going to take and measure exactly how much you undo. So my mom taught me a long time ago, if you're doing yards, I don't know how this works out, meters, but if you take and turn your head, okay, and you measure from the tip of your nose to your hand, that equals approximately 1 yard. So that is a quick and easy way to figure out a yard, okay? So you're gonna turn your head and hold the string from your nose to your wrist, and again, that's approximately 1 yard. So as you're undoing your 5 by 5 square, you're going to be measuring how many yards you used for that 5 by 5 square. So after you have measured how much yarn you use in that 5 by 5 square, that's going to be C. So my C was 16 yards, okay? So if you take 16 and divide it by 25, or however many, well, it should be 25 squares. Mine was 0.64, okay? And so then you're going to take that D, 0.64, or whatever your yardage was for the 25 squares, and then you're going to times it by the total number of squares you're going to need, which if you take grid paper and you map it out, you can get a total count of squares that you will need. So for my sleeves, I had 180 squares on each one. For my back panel, I had a total of 754 squares, and then the sides each totaled 312. So my grand total was 1738 squares for my entire project. And then because the edging right here for the neck and the sides isn't really going to be in the square count, I basically just filled it in. So front and back panel plus the neck and the side edging added some more squares. So including all of these squares in the middle between the sides and the neck. My grand total was $17.90. So for me, my total yardage that I needed was like 1,145 yards. So if you're using meters, the metric system instead of, you know, the US yards, there is a conversion. If you Google it, you can do a conversion from yards to meters. So and that's pretty accurate. That's pretty close to exactly what I needed for this project. So how do you make the corner to corner squares or tiles? How do you do that? First, start out with a slip knot, and then you're going to chain 6. And then you're going to work a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're going to put a double crochet in that chain. And then you're going to work 2 more double crochets down your chain. And if you don't know how to do a double crochet, I do have some other how-to videos that go into a little more depth. When you're looking at your grid that you made, this would be the very first square right here is where we're starting out. So this is your first one, your first row, okay? And to build or increase this, you're going to chain another 6 stitches and do the same thing. You're going to work a double crochet into the 4th stitch from the hook. Sorry. And then 2 more. And that last one will go in that last hole. Okay. So now your first one, you should be kind of holding it like this, okay? You're going to turn it up, down, either way, it doesn't matter. But you're going to be working into that chain space that you had. We're going to be working into that, okay? So your hook should just go right into it, and you're going to do a slip stitch, okay? And then you're going to chain 3 and work 3 more double crochets into that space. So now you have just created row 2, okay? Row 1, row 2. So these rows work on a diagonal. You just keep building on themselves, all right? So again, to keep building, because we need at least 26 squares on one of these sides. Well, I do, and I know that you will need more than 2. So again, you chain 6, work a double crochet into the 4th chain from your hook, and then do 2 more. Okay. So this is the beginning of your row 3, and you're going to turn your work either up or down. Either way, you want to go right into that chain space from row 2, slip stitch, okay? And you're gonna keep building blocks. So now here's the next one. You're gonna chain 3 and work 3 more double crochets into that same hole. Okay, now we need to join it to this one in that end chain space with a slip stitch. Chain 3 and add 3 more double crochets. And now you have 3 rows. Okay. So you are going to keep up this process of increasing or building until you have the correct number of squares that you have mapped out. Now for me, I do a color change. It's actually not a full, I actually have 2 lots of the same yarn that ended up being enough different in color that I kind of treated them as 2 different colors. So when I got to my 6th row, I'm going to color change, and I can show you how to do that in case you decided you wanted to do a color change. So I will meet you back and show you how to do a color change. So to do a color change, you're going to, don't quite complete that stitch. And you're going to take your new color, which I know mine doesn't really look like a new color, but it is, and pull it through, okay, kind of, and make sure you leave yourself a long enough tail to weave in. And then you're going to continue on just like you were doing when you increased, chaining the 6th. And do a double crochet into the 4th chain, work your way down. Okay, now for me, the pattern that I'm following, okay, now I'm joining it. Now, like I was saying, the pattern that I'm following, this is the only, I'm doing this one right here. So as I move up, I got to go back to the original color. So I'm going to need to cut my new color. I'm not going to carry it through. And I would suggest that you don't try to carry like this, like your new color, carry the string like up here to this square, because it starts to pull funny like when you get done. So when you have a new color change, just cut instead of trying to carry through, and then at the end you're going to have to weave these in. So if you decide to do color changes, just know that you're going to waste a little bit more yarn with the cuts, and it's going to be a little more effort to weave in all the color changes that you do. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my first color. So I got a color change again. So I'm just going to not work that last slip stitch. I'm going to go back to my first color, which was this one. So I need to cut this one too. This was the 2nd color. All right, so I'm gonna slip stitch with color 1, and then just continue the pattern like we were doing, 3, and then you can, this tail, you don't have to necessarily go back and weave in, you can just work it into your stitches. Okay. But I wouldn't try to carry it through too much because it'll start to pull. So weave this end in later along with these. Okay, so that's how you do color changes. You just, when you need to make the color change, the very first stitch into the new color area, you don't quite complete, you pull in the new color. Okay. Another thing that'll help you with your color changes is make sure that you determine which side is going, if you're going to work up or across the bottom. So like if this is your vertical side, maybe mark it with like a blue stitch marker. And if this side you determine is the bottom, maybe mark it with the red so that you don't get disoriented, because there is, this stitch pattern does take on visual lines. So like for the 2 front pieces, I don't know if you can tell this. For me, these pieces right here, it makes it look like everything is going up. And then if you turn it this way, to me, it makes it look like things are going sideways. So if on your front 2 pieces of the cardigan, if you want them to look the same, like with, see how this one's going sideways and this one is like going up, you want to make sure you keep track of which side is which, the side and the bottom, so that everything comes out looking similarly. I know that some yarn, you can't tell as much with the corner to corner stitch, but for some reason this yarn is really showing like a, how do I want to call that? A visual line. My husband can't tell quite as much, but to me, I can tell. So if that matters to you, make sure that as you mapped things out, this side, you keep track of what is this side and what is the bottom. Okay, so now you've come to one of your corners, one of your edges, and you need to know how to stop growing this. It's called decreasing. Okay, so normally at this point, to keep growing, you do 6 chains. So now what you're going to do is chain 1, and you're going to slip stitch back across the top of your last square. Okay, like that. And then you just keep going into your pattern. Chain 3, and then work 3 more double crochets. Into the chain 3 space. Slip stitch, chain 3. So you just keep doing that. So every time you come to your edge, you just slip stitch across the last square and then keep going. Okay, I'll show you that again. I've reached my edge. Okay, so I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and then slip stitch across the top. This is leftovers from my color changes, so just kind of ignore that. Slip stitching across the top, and then I chain 3 and work another 3 double crochets into that chain 3 space, and then just continue on. So that's how you decrease or you stop building. Okay, now that you know how to do the basics of the corner to corner, you can kind of go back if you want to and do your 5x5 swatch or gauge to help you figure out how much yardage you're going to need. But if you feel confident that you got plenty of yarn, you can go ahead and get started on your pieces. So you're going to want to do your back piece, the 2 sides, and the 2 sleeves, and keep track of what is your side, what is your bottom, what's vertical, what's horizontal, in case you're doing any color changes. And when you come to a corner or your edge, you now know how to stop increasing, or stop building, and decrease. So go ahead and build your 5 pieces, and then I will meet you back and help you do the rest of the sweater. As you finish your pieces, I'm going to fasten off. Once you've finished all 5 of your pieces, we're going to start putting them together. And the first pieces that we're going to put together is the back, which this is the back for me. And these are the 2 front panels. And this is the shoulder area, okay? And you're going to, like I talked about before, there's kind of a visual pattern that this stitch makes. And you just want to, you determine what is the right side and just make sure that they are both facing the same direction. So here's my front piece. Between this side and this side, I determined that this was quote unquote the right side, and same with this back piece. So I'm going to make sure that they're both facing up, okay? And we are going to put together the pieces, all the pieces the same way using the mattress stitch, and I will just give you a brief demonstration on that. So I usually cut at least 3 times the length that I need to stitch together. Make sure I don't run out of yarn halfway through stitching up the sides. And then you're going to get your tapestry needle, put your yarn through, and then I'm going to turn it sideways. It does help to use stitch markers. Make sure everything lines up, your edges line up. And it's nice with this corner to corner, you can line up your tiles, you know, your 5th tile, your 6th tile, you know, they should all line up. All right, so with the mattress stitch, and you can weave in all your ends before you put together the piece or after, it kind of is up to you. But I just secure my yarn here at the end and leave enough of a tail that you can weave it in. I do kind of a slip knot. You don't have to use a knot. If you leave a long enough length, you can weave it in and secure it that way too. Just makes me feel better to have a knot there. So now for the mattress stitch, this is the inside of the seam, okay? And you're gonna go from the inside to the outside of the seam. And then go to the other side, the inside to the outside. And you just work your way up this seam, going from the inside to the out, from one side and then the other. Like you're lacing up a shoe. Okay, and just continue up your seam. If you use stitch markers, it'll make it easier. Easier might not be the right word, but you'll ensure that everything stays lined up, that you don't start weaving in this side a little bit more than this side. Once you've gotten to the other end, you can again secure it with a knot or just weave it in. But either way, this now might be a decent time to weave in some of your tails. That's what we're going to do. I'll show you how to do that now instead of at the end of the project, but you're just going to want to weave back and forth. I don't need quite this long a tail, so I'm not going to do the whole thing. And then once you've kind of gone back and forth, feel like it's good and secure, cut it. Okay, and that is how you're going to continue to weave up the edges. Weave in the edges. Okay, do the next shoulder. So I am going to finish the inside of the neck area. Let me see if I can kind of orient you to what's what here. This is the bottom of my sweater, and this is the neck, the inside of the neck, and here is the top around the back of my neck. And the way I'm going to finish this off, which you don't have to, you could leave it just like it is. You don't necessarily have to put any finishing touches on it. But this is my right side that's facing up. And I am going to join, I'm going to do a row of single crochets and then repeat the rows with single crochets in the front loop. And to do that, I'm going to join it. This is the front right inside corner. Okay, I'm going to join my yarn with a slip stitch. Okay, and this is my tail from, so I have two tails I'm going to incorporate. So I'm going to single crochet, chain one, and then single crochet all along this edge. I don't know why I looked like I was going to do a double crochet. So here's my first single crochet. I'm going to put a stitch marker in there just to mark the end, and then you're going to work single crochets up this edge. And I basically am doing 2 single crochets for each square, each tile. I also went up 2 hook sizes to do this row of the finishing off the inside. So depending on if you increase your hook size and depending on what yarn you use to finish off the edge, you might need to do 3 single crochets per tile, or 2. You might need to play with it and just make sure it doesn't start puckering. Generally, I think people use too many single crochets. So when in doubt, start with fewer single crochets per tile. And I am trying to work my single crochets into actual stitches, not the holes, so that it doesn't pull as much. Okay, so I will meet you on the other end, this side, and I will show you how to do the front loop single crochet. Okay, here's where I started and went all the way up, came back down. Now I'm at the end. This is the left side, the front inside corner, and I chained one, and now I'm gonna flip the entire thing and work back up this, okay? And so I am working in the front loop of all these single crochets, and I'm going from the, bottom up, okay? All right, so here is my single crochets, okay? And this is the front loop. There's the back loop. All right, and I'm going underneath this front loop only, yarning over, pulling through those two loops, okay? So if you go from the top down and grab your yarn, it has a whole different look. So I'm going from underneath, yarning over, pulling through, yarning over, and then making my single crochet. Okay, and I am going to continue to do rows of single crochets in the front loop only until my width has reached about an inch. So probably for me is only going to be 3 rows, and I'm going to have reached an inch. So it's up to you. You can just do 1 row of single crochets to finish it. You can do no rows of single crochet. You can do 2 inches. It's up to you. But what I did was about an inch. So before we put the sleeves on the main part, on the rest of the cardigan, we're going to do exactly what we did for the neck. The edging on the neck, we're going to do that on both sides, the edging of both sides, okay? I'm starting with the quote-unquote right side up, and this is the bottom left outside corner, and we're going to go all along this outside edge. This is my seam where the front and the back connect, which we will add the sleeve right here, but after we do the edging. So we're going to go along all the way from the front, along the side, all the way to the back on both sides, just like we did the neck edging with the single crochet in the front loop only. Do the same number of rows on the side edges as you did for the neck edge. So for me that was 3 rows, and it equaled about an inch. That was my goal, to have both these edgings be about an inch wide. Now we're going to put on the sleeves, and to do that you're going to go to the outside edge and find the seam from your front to your back. Mine's right here, and mark it on the outside. Then you're going to take your sleeve and long ways, find the middle, and you're going to want to find the right side, whatever that is for you. For me, it's going to be like this. Okay, you can find the middle by counting the squares and finding middle, or just fold it in half and then mark middle. You're going to line those two up, where your shoulder seam is and where the middle of the sleeve is. And then I would use stitch markers to secure it on either side here, so that you don't end up pulling it a little too far this way or too far this way. You can use your squares, the number of squares, to make sure that you are right in the middle. Then you're going to get your triple the length of your sleeve, the width of your sleeve, and your tapestry needle, and do the same mattress stitch, the way we secured the front to the back, doing the same thing here to secure the sleeve. Okay, last but not least, you're going to fold your sweater in half and then work your side and your sleeve, and then you are done. So you can just go along the side with the mattress stitch, and then your sleeve, and then after you weave in all your little ends, you are done. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoy your sweater as much as I do, and don't forget to subscribe and share with me your projects on my Facebook page. Thanks again.